Hello.
Hello. Hello.
I feel like I have to do a sermon now.
It feels religious.
Congregation. Don't know if I have any words of
All right, sit
inspiration
down.
for you, but I will do my best. Sit down.
Sit down.
Sit.
Thank you all for coming. This is going to be as painless as possible. I keep saying painful. First of all, because it's really informal and it's very last minute. And so my name is Charles Finch. I'm the editor-in-chief of our magazine, A Rabbit's Foot. And I'm very proud to have my dear friend and I think one of the greatest actors that cinema has ever produced, Adrien Brody.
Thank you. Thank you for that. That's very kind of you. Thank you all. Really, thank you for coming. I hope I can share something insightful.
Well, I'm sure you will. So I don't think everybody has seen the film because it's just come out in the UK.
So no spoilers.
No spoilers.
Okay.
But the BAFTA members who have seen the film have all unanimously thought it was a brilliant piece of work. So welcome to London. How does it feel, this whole process?
It's been a really beautiful moment in my life. The journey to get here has been long, and I've experienced many blessings in my career over the years, and I've experienced the peaks and the valleys. And for those of you who don't know much about the film, it's about a Hungarian architect who's well established, and he survives the horrors of World War II and escapes those horrors and immigrates to America. And it's really about him rebuilding and finding opportunities to leave behind a body of work that outlives him, and I think these are the yearnings that most artistic people feel, and it's very relatable. I know it's very much a yearning of Brady Corbet, our filmmaker, and in spite of those yearnings and in spite of the very blessed career that I've had, it's been very challenging to find a role of quite of this caliber, of complexity, of humanity, of frailty and flaws, and even sheer amount of time to live with the protagonist. And so when I encountered this 5 years ago...
And so what happened? You get this script. How do you feel? Where are you? Tell me the process.
I wasn't in the bath, but the script was submitted, and I had a meeting pending with Brady.
It's really interesting because these questions are never asked. What did your agent say to you at that point about this script?
Well, here's a very interesting film project. I don't know what else. What can they say? It wasn't an offer.
Okay.
This was not offered to me. It was something that, upon reading, I felt incredibly well suited to portray, and we can get into those reasons.
Yeah.
But I am very right for this character, and I read it, and it was 168 pages or so, but it was so riveting and so emotional, and it had. I remember feeling it was quite audacious, and it had this breadth and epic storytelling. It was very ambitious for an independent film, and I'm steeped in independent film. And most of the work I've done in my almost 4-decade long journey as an actor is in the independent film space, and it's very challenging to live up to the potential of the material because primarily of restrictions, cost,
cost. Right.
Uh,
Had you seen Brady's work before?
and I'd seen both of Brady's films, or I had seen one and made sure I saw the other by the time we had met. He's done two really wonderful films. He did Childhood of a Leader, which is quite a great film, and Vox Lux. And they're both very different, but clearly show a director with a great understanding of storytelling language and visual, and he's quite unique. And I read this and felt like this has tremendous potential. And we met and we spoke about it, and we dined together, and I shared all the reasons I felt that I was right for this movie, and ultimately they went with another actor.
What?
You
Did
didn't
you know that?
Yes.
Did anybody know that story?
Yes.
Hello,
And
please, front cover of the newspapers, all right?
call the press. Ooh, big question. I know you said that. Not I. And not only
you want to get
not only she can step in. Yeah. If you get tired, it can be like a tag team match.
we give you $20. You come in here anytime. All right.
And not only my role, but other characters. There was a complete different iteration of this film, and I think partially this is the nature and the complexity of what I was speaking to earlier. That in spite of a yearning and a capacity to give and do work of this caliber, it's not always afforded to you, even if you're right for it, because there are other factors. There are lists and some relevant and some arbitrary reasons why someone may be more suited for something in spite of...
all right, who?
It's irrelevant. You can look it up.
Look it up.
But the point is, it never happened. And then that fell apart, and COVID delayed things further, or may have been a culprit. And then it came around in a new iteration 3 years later, and they came to me with an offer. They came to me. Then I remember my agent saying, "The Brutalist is back around in discussion." It was still not yet presented to me as an offer, and I will be honest. I did mourn the loss of this opportunity when it went away, because I did see. I saw how meaningful this could and would have been for me. And ultimately, they were able to put it together and fund it with me in place, and with Felicity and Guy, and who are wonderful in this film. And
thank goodness
they made the movie. Thank goodness. Yeah.
Let me ask you a question, Adrien. And you don't have to answer this if it's awkward. Then fine. I'm not going to ask you your star sign. But
I'm an Aries.
all right. I'm a triple Leo, by the way. So any Aries women, we're perfect for each other. So maybe that's not this meeting. That's the next meeting we're doing after this.
Okay.
So you talked about the highs and lows. Obviously, you're an Academy Award winner. You've had enormous.
That was a high.
That was a high. Would you mind describing, because what people don't really, and I've worked with actors all my career, as you know, and I love actors. Some people in our business don't actually like actors.
I know that. It's funny.
It's weird, and it can be major directors too who really don't like actors, and producers too. And I had a fucking actor, that fucking actor. I've always loved actors, and consequently,
depends on the actor, but yes, but yes.
I've had the odd one who's pointed fingers at me before, but anyway. But tell me about the lows, because here you are, you win an Academy Award, and tell me about the lows, because I think that's really interesting, and then we can get to my script a bit. But
sure.
Tell me about the lows.
Well, look, life, an expectation for things to go smoothly at all times, or to even feel consistent happiness, is unrealistic. That is not the human condition. And as we look around in this world, there is far too much hardship, and so why should we feel that we are to be free of that, encountering that in various stages and iterations throughout our life, or the lives of our loved ones? And so I've never, it's par for the course, especially an artistic course. And if you pursue a professional life as an actor, as an artist, it is more challenging because, you know, you have to understand that it is a business, and certain artistic, creative, and experimental inclinations are not really rewarded necessarily by the industry. These moments, like this film, are an exception, where an artistic endeavor somehow culminates from all of these wonderful creative collaborative efforts, and works and is received with a level of respect, and works as a distributable asset, and valuable property for our distributors, and that is a prerequisite for a filmmaker to have a career, and for an actor to inhabit roles in meaningful films. You have to have a track record. But if you want to do experimental and interesting artistic work, it can't live up to that criteria at all times, right?
So in other words, you have these lulls where you can't find the material that,
or you make choices that can be easily dismissed as not successful, but based on a criteria that isn't your own. Right. And I did a movie with Tony Kaye. I'm sure some of you know. He's a wonderful filmmaker. He did American History X, and he did this very small film he did in New York about the failings of the public education system. My father was a public school teacher in New York, and I wanted to honor his contribution and also represent the hardships for young people in an urban environment where there's constant polls, and how challenging it is, and how not only the difficulties in a public school, the system of it, but where it must begin in the home, and how that's primarily where you have to begin that education process with your children, not just thrust them upon the teacher and 50 kids in a class and assume that everything's going to turn out all right. So we made this film for nothing, literally, for very little money, and another labor of love. And it's beautifully received from people. It's called Detachment. You can find it, I'm sure, on streaming now. But it's a wonderful film. But of course, a film like that can't make money, right? It's not meant for that. It's not a box office draw. And when you look at your numbers, which are a criteria to be on a list, to be eligible to even do a film like The Brutalist, because they have to see what your value is in foreign pre-sales. They have to see what, that brings you way down. But if I just waited for something to follow King Kong and only waited for a studio film, I would have a much higher rating as far as my earnings potential, but it would be a very vastly different creative path. Is all I'm saying.
A big rating with me, buddy. So, and I am very fucking discerning.
We were talking. I think I got off track though. I feel like it's fine.
It was fine. Are we off track? We okay?
Did I not finish the thought?
Yeah, I was. No, you were saying you make a very difficult artistic choice.
Oh, you wanted to talk about failures, or the hardship. That's what it was. I was like, I don't think we really tapped into that yet. If you'd like to go there, I'll go there with you.
No, what I was really trying to say is that
there's plenty to go for. Right?
You make this movie, you win an Academy Award. Yeah. A lot of people have talked in the press about, did you tap into the experience that you had in the research of being a Holocaust survivor, and then did you use that for this movie? This is sort of obvious questions, and I imagine, does everybody need to go down there? Maybe talk about that for a second.
Sure. A lot of parallels have been made with The Pianist, which is another pillar in my.
Oh, bro.
Exactly, and I feel I can agree thematically in a correlation with the work that was required of me to. I was 27 when I made that film, and for me to represent the horrors and loss and resilience of a survivor amidst, one man's journey representing the loss of 6 million, and portray an individual in a memoir that honors that survivor's life was an enormous amount of pressure for me and responsibility. And I did a great deal of work.
By the way, today is Holocaust Day.
It was yesterday, but yes, it's
yesterday. So
yes,
it's kind of poignant, a poignant subject. So you could tap in, even though it was a number of years ago, you could tap into the research that you've done and bring it to this character.
Yeah, the interesting thing is that it is really what Laszlo, the character in The Brutalist, has endured and is trying to leave behind. And so much about The Brutalist is about how traumas how post-war architecture really was deeply influenced and is intrinsically linked to the post-war psychology, and the traumas of war and hardships in an artist's life clearly are things that are matters that are worked through and inform that artist's choices. And that spoke to me in two significant ways. One, I understood that in a greater capacity in my efforts to honor Spielman's story. So I had a real point of reference for that had moved me in a way that I felt a changed person evermore from the making of The Pianist. And also, my mother and my grandparents fled Hungary during the revolution in 1956 and immigrated to the United States. And so my own mother and my grandparents' journey is echoed through the lived experience of my character. And my mother is a very well-respected photographer, New York photographer, and she has a wonderful, beautiful eye and empathetic way of viewing the world and caring for the world and representing it through her imagery. And I feel that much of her awareness of the hardships and suffering of others is through her own experiences, and she's applied it through her work and is so devoted to her work and to leaving behind a body of work that I had this tremendous understanding of this character. And her work and her inclinations creatively have deeply influenced my own path as an artist. And so even in spite of this film, I've already drawn the parallels. And so to find a role that I can hone in on all of these beautiful and personal hurdles, hardships, and resilience, it was really
amazing.
phenomenal. It was really a phenomenal opportunity.
When you see the film, and those of you who've seen it, from the very first moment, not only is your physicality very right for the survivor role, but maybe after dinner you'll feel less so. But your face in that extraordinary first scenes of the arrival in New York, and then the embracing of your friend or cousin in New York. It's immensely powerful, just visually, just immediately, to see the pain, and that you can then. Richard Harris, can I tell you a little story? So Richard Harris, I would always say to Richard Harris, "Oh my God, I loved you in Cromwell." And Cromwell, obviously, Richard Harris was one of our great actors. He said, "You don't know what the fuck you're talking about." I said, "No, I thought you were marvelous in that film." He said, "No, I blew it immediately on the first scene. That's my Irish accent. I gave everything, meaning that I gave everything immediately, and there was nowhere for me to go in the arc of the character story. And what is so remarkable to me about your performance in this movie, because obviously you can see I don't do this very often, but what is really remarkable, and I'd only do it for somebody like you,
Thank you.
is that you immediately give this heart-wrenching, within the first few minutes of the film, performance, and you're just staggered by it. The audience is staggered by it. You think, Christ, I thought, Christ, where can he go from there? and yet, Brady and you do carve this story that allows the entrance of all these other character facets, the drug addiction, etc., and so forth, and this dream of success. Anyway, it's a really extraordinary performance, one of the great performances. Tell me something. Do you, when you take on a role like this, do you study architecture? Do you do a lot of research, or do you just sort of imbibe it?
So Laszlo Toth, the character I portray, is a fictional character. And when Brady and Mona Fastvold, who's Brady's wife and creative partner, decided to write this film, they're lovers of architecture, and they wanted to research a successful Bauhaus-era architect who had survived the war and made his way to the States, preferably, but who made his way on and carried on in his work. And there were no survivors. And so they made a fictional story. And I think it further represents a tremendous loss that we all, for humanity, of all the immense creativity and artistry that's been erased from this planet. And he's an amalgamation of a number of beautifully successful architects of that era that managed to flee prior or move on. Marcel Breuer, Louis Kahn, Mies van der Rohe. There's a number of really incredible, profound architects that had certain paths that were similar, but it is a fictional character, and there's a lot of room to interpret it. I have an appreciation for brutalist architecture that preceded the film. I don't love all brutalist structures. Some of them look like a parking lot, but some are wonderful and dramatic in what they speak to, and there's much of it is a lot of it in London, obviously. You know, a lot of it was built out of necessity post-war and needed accessible, inexpensive materials to build large spaces. A lot of them were government sanctioned to create these things. But
so you knew.
I have an appreciation of it that preceded decades prior. I remember actually shooting a movie in Prague in my early 20s and encountering a brutalist structure and someone telling me that's a brutalist building. I was like, yeah, that is the perfect word for it. You know, like it was just perfect. and brute is concrete in French, so it has nothing really to do with brutal. It's coming from the original term of it being a brute, raw concrete, which is the general usage. I will say that there's a wonderful, when you see the film, it's not really giving anything away, but there is a metaphor that I've found quite beautiful. There's many metaphors in the film, but this Laszlo is hired to build this institute, this kind of public center for this wealthy landowner. And in Laszlo's creation of this structure surreptitiously represents many things, and as I alluded to, processing his own traumas. But the physical structure, these kind of walled off structure really felt very symbolic of the state of where he gets to as a man, this cavernous, hollowed out center, and this concrete walls to fend off the horrors of reality and what he has endured and continues to kind of be forced to endure in various degrees. And then this opening within the structure to commune with a higher power, and this yearning for freedom creatively and emotionally and psychologically through this space of looking up into the light, and all of that was very much what I had to embody in portraying this man. Yeah. And there's one other thing about architecture. I won't go on too much, but I spent, and you might know, I spent 7 years renovating an old stone barn that I had bought upstate New York, that I bought 22 years ago, and I kind of wanted to run a bit from the trappings of Hollywood, as part of a bigger picture of, in the height of my career, I moved upstate to a dilapidated barn that came with a broken down pickup truck, and I lived there, with no insulation in my roof and a wood stove that I had to get up at 5 a.m. every day to light, or else we'd be freezing to death. And I had animals and really lived on a farm, and rebuilt this with local tradesmen, architect, no architect. I really acted as the architect and designer of the rehabilitation, and I brought in teams of masons and local blacksmiths, and I traveled to Asia and throughout India and China and integrated old artifacts from various sources and old church windows from the turn of the century, and made this sculptural work, which spanned 7 years off and on, and is still a work in progress. I've built an art studio there and designed it with my caretaker, who's a dear friend of mine, designed a clear span structure, and picked everything from how I want light to come in through transoms and concrete floors and rough cut siding. So it's all a love and respect for the craftsmanship of it and the artistry in it. So oddly, that also probably helped. It didn't hurt. I didn't need that, but I feel like it didn't hurt, and it was painful. It's a painful process.
You're a purist. You really are a purist. Tell me something.
I'm a lunatic.
You're a purist, but you're a purist. I think I'm a purist too. But tell me, Adrien is a painter. I don't know if any of you know that, but he's a really good, remarkable painter, actually. Do you get any time to paint at the moment?
Not lately. I haven't really had much time.
Because of all this stuff happening.
Yeah, and it's a blessing. It's a blessing to not have time to paint. I swear.
Really?
It is a blessing.
Why?
Well, painting came about. I grew up in a very artistic home. My mother, as I mentioned, is a wonderful photographer. So I grew up with imagery everywhere. She photographed my city, and ever since I could crawl, there were images strewn about throughout the house, prints, test prints, laid out on old record racks right in front of we had a very modest home, so one bathroom, so she would have the film canisters in the tub being rinsed. She'd have negatives hanging in the shower during the day, and the prints laid out on the landing on our second floor where my bedroom was. And so I was surrounded by imagery, and she let me draw on them and paint on ones that she didn't need. And my father's quite a wonderful painter, self-taught, and he's a remarkable painter. He doesn't paint anymore, really, but he's made some wonderful works. And when I had applied to drama school, I had applied also to the fine art department and didn't get accepted, fortunately, because I would have been a starving artist. And it's easier to sell a painting once you're a successful actor, I tell you that much.
Is it?
It is. Oh, yeah. It's I laugh about it all the time. I did not get accepted, and I think a lot of that made me put down painting for many years. I think it because I wasn't worthy of the experts. I didn't get approved. Then thought I must not be good enough, and so I put down my visual art creative work. And interestingly, when I did this renovation on this stone barn, I felt so enriched creatively that this preceded me painting again, and I loved immersing myself in that and envisioning how it can become more beautiful and remain intact. And then there came a period that I found, unfortunately, less access to the caliber of roles that I found very rewarding. And my whole life I've worked professionally since I was 12. And
my daughter's in the audience. Remember that, Una.
Well, it takes time.
Yeah.
It takes time. It does. And I found I rediscovered painting because it gave me a creative autonomy that is not afforded to us as actors, because it is such a collaborative medium, and you're reliant upon interpreting the words and the writings of others, and then your work is also in the hands of others, the filmmaker, the editor, the way you are filmed, and how it is depicted. And
I understand that so well, because William Goldman used to say the best part of he was a great screenwriter, the moment he enjoyed most was sitting down alone finishing the script, because he made the movie all alone, in control of it. You know, I completely understand that. I had a big movie star client many years ago when I was managing actors, who was also a painter, but he was a terrible painter. And we used to dread him saying, "Hey."
A lot of actors paint, by the way. It's a very funny thing.
He said, "Listen, Finch, you got to do something about my art." He said, "Come and see the art. You got to put on a show." We were like, "Oh my God, what are we going to do?"
I don't do that to people. I don't really.
But I
don't make anybody do.
He's a good painter, but this was not a good painter. Finally, one day I said to him, "Listen, you know, I think your art needs time to mature, maybe 100, 200 years, and then it's going to be really good." Okay, so this is such a boring question, but I think it's required. What's the most interesting part of your work as an actor, especially at this stage of your career? In other words, what are you looking to do? What will happen now? Now you've done this another thing. What will you look for? You know?
The ability to do what I love after all these years, and to still love what I do, is more than I could ever ask for. And that love quite recently waned, partially due to circumstances, not my lack of love for the craft of acting or a yearning to give whatever I can to the roles, but just the fact that something like this was not attainable. And so it's quite healing in many ways to have a film of this complexity and responsibility, because I've been yearning for that, and I know what I have to offer, and it wasn't being reciprocated for various reasons, and so to be here today with you, to be speaking about something that I am very proud of, and that really does, it's more than my participation in this. It's this film, and I think you will probably agree with me if you've seen it or will see it, really lifts up independent cinema.
100%.
It's shot on VistaVision, which is a near obsolete apparatus. It's like a sewing machine. It's a horizontally mounted magazine. It's incredibly noisy and analog, but it has a different aspect. It has more space to capture an image, and so when you can see it on 70 millimeter, you're really seeing such a a beautiful image that's not distorted and has tremendous depth of field, and it's remarkable. And there hasn't been an American movie shot on it since 1961.
It's amazing. You have to go see this in the theaters, by the way.
It is just, we made this movie for under $10 million in 33 days, and it is an epic, epic film. And it was very difficult to accomplish for everyone, especially for Brady. It was a 7-year endeavor. And so the fact that it's taken me over 2 decades to find a role, to live up to a standard and a certain expectation of mine, because The Pianist was such an achievement, it says a lot about the nature of how fleeting it is and how challenging it is for an artist in spite of having tremendous good fortune along the way. It's still hard to find something like this and for it to come to fruition on this level. And so, long story short, I don't take any of that for granted. I've had a lot of years to give me a lot of perspective, and feeling this love for my work and having that reciprocated and the respect for my peers is remarkable.
Thank you for answering that so honestly. I mean, I have to say, all of the young filmmakers here, and there's quite a few of you, don't be conned that you see a movie on your cell phone. David Lynch talked about this the other day. There's a film of him speaking about this, who says, you're not watching a film when you watch it on your cell phone or on a small screen. It's a different thing. It's a different experience. And we're being conned. We're being conned at the moment to say, okay, well, you can watch it on your TV, on your iPad, or whatever. Content. Now, I'm about to get fired by Netflix. And
right. I didn't come up with that. I came up with that, but I didn't say we're being conned.
But it's a con. Actually, going to the movies, especially seeing a movie like this, which is on a vast experience, or an IMAX movie, a big screen movie, it's a totally different experience. The other thing that's a different experience, and I'm going to lecture about this endlessly until I die, is actually watching it with people.
Yes, I agree with that.
Because you get a different thing. It's not just horror movies, because the studio heads keep saying to me, hey, horror movies, we're safe with them, or release them, and people will scream and shout. Actually, all movies, if you're going to see a love story with somebody that you love, or your friends, it's a very moving thing. So we are blessed with this art form that we have to protect.
But there's something about seeing a movie that inspires the potential of so much empathy and understanding for others, and as we look around the world and see so many displaced people and so much hardship and people being hardworking people being deported and ripped apart from their lives, and totally. You have to just look at it from the human perspective. There are many complexities to it. I don't deny that, but from the human perspective of these helpless people who are yearning to escape to horrendous conditions, and the disconnect between those hopes and dreams and the reality of what awaits, and toiling through poverty and not really being treated as an equal, and not feeling home, or that you're an alien, is the reality for so many. So if you're in a communal space, considering these aspects, I think it has potential to be a greater empathetic,
I agree.
Catalyst.
I totally agree, and that's why immigrants often, give so much to society and end up.
That's right,
with so
and
much
I think that's what this film speaks to also,
and
about
they end
the
up
great
changing
contributions
the
that are exploited, and they're still not treated with equality or sense of respect.
Ridiculous what is happening in certain places. Anyway, you mentioned to me, this is quite a good question from my team, which I can't remember who wrote it, but one of you, well done. You mentioned to me recently that if you could tattoo any poem on yourself, it would be Bluebird after Bukowski's poem. what is the significance of that poem and poetry in general? That's a stupid argument. And to you as a creative soul. Sorry, the first part is really good.
Right. Well, we don't have to wax poetic.
But I like the
poetry.
bluebird
But
Bukowski thing.
Well, the question was, what poem would you tattoo on your body? And I thought that would be an interesting way of representing a poem without the words, and the symbolism of the bluebird within the poem, and the symbolism of the tattoo of a bird representing a poem that is quite personal. It doesn't have to. Of course, I remember. Yeah. I wouldn't tattoo it if I didn't remember the poem.
Just check it.
I'd have to write. Maybe if I didn't remember the poem, I'd tattoo the written word so I could refer to it.
I thought that was maybe where we were going.
Yeah. But I think the beauty of poetry and the beauty of that poem is it invokes. It kind of wipes away the haze of what we know and see that's kind of muted from our lives, and the poem references having a bluebird in your heart that wants to be free, and the singing in there, and I hear you singing, but he doesn't let it free because of all the reasons we suppress our freedom, our ability to soar above and sing, societal pressures, our own, feelings of repressing our spirit, and as men culturally, etc. And so I found it quite beautiful, and it speaks to overall what the beauty of anything artistic can do that unites us. And I think most people in this room can read that poem and find a connection to that and relate to those yearnings and how we've suppressed those yearnings, or how others have unwittingly or intentionally conspired to keep that within, and the end of the poem, he says, it's enough. It says, I'm paraphrasing. He says something like, enough to make a man cry, but I don't cry. Do you? And it's just so beautiful and says so much about.
You got to read that. You got to read Bukowski anyway, all of you.
He's great.
So I got two more questions, so don't worry, don't panic. So first question.
You thought this lecture was long. The movie's 3.5 hours.
This is not long, is it?
We can have an intermission. You guys can take a break and come back.
Am I doing?
Get a drink.
Cristiano, is it boring?
Are you good?
I'm not boring, but he might be a bit boring. But I'm really interested.
Am I putting you to sleep yet? Sorry.
All right. So there's some young actors out here. What do you say to young actors? How do you tell them about? Give them some spirit. Give them something. It's tough being a young actor.
Well, look, it's a calling. I think I know several young actors in this room who are quite gifted, and there are many talented people pursuing this life, and it's a hard life, and we all know that. I think if you've worked in this space, you recognize it pretty soon, and if you haven't, you're either oblivious or you're a real anomaly, and or very lucky. But I know that it's something that I used to joke when I discovered acting when I was very young. I was like, it sure beats working for a living. But it is incredibly hard work. But it's full of joy. It's full of an ability to immerse yourself in something so purely, and it's always different. You're always going to inhabit someone new. You're always going to have an opportunity to speak to things and have a curiosity and a childlike enthusiasm as old as you get. you can keep that. You can keep that pure and fight for that. And most jobs and responsibilities as an adult prohibit that.
Yeah.
And it speaks to that poem, which is, I have that bluebird in my heart. And the way it comes out is through these characters. And it wouldn't come out if I had to do most other works that didn't give me the space, the freedom to find creative expression and to also speak to so many things that are of great complexity in this world, that aren't really solvable in words, that are just beyond entertainment. I think the joy of being an actor is not to have a big career and be very successful on a superficial level. Everyone desires to be successful and have their work treated with respect and received with respect. But again, it's you have to follow your own barometer, your own divining rod, and have your own respect for those choices, regardless of a subjective point of view on what you should be doing with your work. And that will be projected upon you if you do get any modicum of success.
Totally. Thank you for that answer. I mean, I think the great actors that I've been lucky enough to work with and sometimes really gone through hard times with, I think they all just focus on the work, really, on the work, not on the fame. They give a shit about the fame or the money. They care about the work. That's how my barometer is.
Sure, but the majority, there's, I don't know how many now, but there's in excess of 100,000 easily actors within the Screen Actors Guild. And I think the majority of the union base earn less than the poverty line on their acting earnings. So that's the reality. There is a handful of people that make an enormous amount of money, and then there are a handful of actors who are fortunate enough to work and be working actors and have a consistent career and can feed their families doing that work. And then there's an enormous amount of struggle. And I think there's a huge disconnect, and there's obviously, celebrity and things are kind of distorted, but that it is a very cush life, and it can be at times, but it's nothing to do with what is gratifying of the work, and anybody who cares about that work would tell you that that's not it. But if you can get the enough to live a good life with your family and all that, and do the caliber of work that you choose to do, then that's winning. That's winning.
Last question, because I think you're going to pass out otherwise. So, actually, it's two questions. How quickly into a conversation with a director can you feel him or her that they know what they're doing? And have you thought of directing? So two questions.
I don't think you can tell from a conversation.
My experience. I directed 3 movies. I was really good in the room.
Yes.
Everybody loved me. They thought I was fantastic. And I was really convincing on the set, but I was a really bad director.
Well, you're honest.
Yeah.
Well, honesty helps. If you speak to someone and they're honest, it does help.
So
there's a lot of people that talk a really big game. It's funny, when I met Brady, he's so knowledgeable, and he's such a cinephile, and he's so well read, and he's young. He's 36. And I met him, he was 31, and he talked a big game, and I was like, it's impressive, but I didn't know how he would apply it and how our working relationship, or how collaborative it would be. And he surpassed every expectation I had.
That's so
he
great.
just was so generous in spirit, and he applied all of his understanding of life and art into this movie. And he was formerly an actor, so he understood the space that actors needed, and that was really wonderful. And I do aspire to direct, but after working with Brady, I really I'm very intimidated by an actor turned director.
Mm-hmm.
But I hopefully one day we'll find the right opportunity and timing, and we'll apply a lifetime of collaborating with really brilliant filmmakers, wonderful actors, and wonderful producers, as well as my mother's own distinct visual sense and perspective that has also kind of informed a lot for me. So I think I have a lot to offer. I just it has to be the right thing, because it's so immersive and takes a tremendous amount of time and commitment.
Well, Adrien, first of all, I know this is an intense time for you. And for all of you who don't know, they run up to these awards, and it's just exhausting. So I want to thank you very much.
My friend Mike is here. We did a play at the Dunmar together. We were doing 8 shows a week, and I went off to Venice one day, and
you're the lawyer. Yeah, I remember. He was very good.
Numerous characters. He's wonderful.
See my people.
He's wonderful. He's wonderful in the play, and it kind of snowballed into this momentum, and I had a responsibility to help support the release of the film while we were doing this play, and I'm so grateful for it. I don't mind working hard or being tired from the work. And I really, because I know there are these vast chasms between this, and there will be again. And but that was a very special time there, and so I was kind of doing a double shift, 8 shows a week, and in between, on performance nights, I would be doing press and virtual interviews and sit-down interviews with journalists in my dressing room there, and they were very supportive. The cast was wonderful and were very supportive of me and knew what pressures I was under. And I also hadn't done a play since I was a young teenager, and so that too was a handful to take on.
Thank you again.
Yeah.
Thank you, Adrien. Everybody who's listening to this, who's an actor or director, stay humble. That's what humble is. All right. Much love. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.